Hello everyone, my name is Michael and you're watching Brilliant Blunders, a channel that's all about me playing chess. In this video I will be covering round 4 of the Pakleza Cup, the tournament I played in. I have white pieces and I got to play probably my favorite opening or my favorite line with white. Let's get into it. I start with e4. My opponent plays e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. I play the Italian, all very standard stuff. My opponent plays bishop c5, very normal. I castle, that's also kind of normal. Usually I think the main line is d3, but I play castles first for a very specific reason. Because after my opponent's move knight f6, which is, very standard, absolutely normal Italian setup. In most games, white just plays d3, castles, I don't know, c3, and normal Italian stuff happens. But in this position, I go for the immediate d4. This is called the Deutz Gambit, and it's I think it's very unpopular for a reason that I really don't understand. I didn't really see much resources or videos on this online. I basically found one video by Stepan from Hanging Pawns covering this as part of his covering all of the Italian. And his video was the basis for my prep that I have in this line, and I think this is absolutely amazing gambit, because obviously it's a gambit, right? So black has total control of the d4 square, so the pawn is it is a pawn sacrifice, but it's a very sharp line. Black needs to be very precise to defend correctly, and obviously on like a very high level this wouldn't fly, because with precise play black is equal or even slightly better, because you're giving up a pawn. But in practice I think like 90% of my games I'm able to get a really good position right out of the opening, and it leads to many victories. So let's take a closer look at this, because this is actually the key moment in the game, right? So me playing this gambit and my opponent not knowing or not finding the exactly correct way to defend against it. So black obviously can capture in 3 different ways. Knight capture is just bad, because black recaptures here, and this is trouble, right? So this is like the f7 square is really weak, and this does not give black anything. I have my pawn back and I'm attacking, so knight is pretty much ruled out. Taking with the pawn is interesting, and that's I think this is the most common answer from people who seemingly do not know this line. And to this, white responds with immediate e5. So I sacrifice the pawn in order to push my my e-pawn, attack this knight. This is actually a transposition into a variation called the Max Lang attack, which sometimes arises from the Italian, sometimes from the Scotch game. And here it also, this is very sharp, and black needs to be very precise. A lot of people just go wrong right here by just moving this knight somewhere, and I think like all of the knight retreats lead to a worse position for black. The correct way to counter this is go d5 and counterattack the bishop, and then there's still stuff happening. So black is slightly better here, but white absolutely has some good chances for active game. The black king is kind of exposed, because white will just take here, and black can never safely castle kingside. If anything, black castles queenside, and we have an interesting game. So that's and it's, that's just scratching the surface. There's much more to this pawn takes line, but I don't want to go too deep into this. So the correct and this is not incorrect, taking with the pawn, but taking with the bishop is better. And that's what my opponent played in this game. So well done for him. He found the best move here. Here white takes with the knight. Black again takes with the knight, because obviously taking with the pawn again leads to similar things, right? If you do this, then maybe I go here, and it's still white has a lot of development attack, and it's kind of trouble. And most people actually do take with the knight. And here I continue my attack, right? So I go f4. So this attacks this pawn. Black cannot take because the knight drops. So black needs to do something else. And this is a moment where most people fail in this line, because most people move the knight somewhere, either to e6 or to c6. The correct way to defend is to just play d6 and go for this. There is still some theory going further. I have prepared next couple moves. White is still down one pawn. He has this isolated e4 pawn, but there is a lot of attacking chances, right? So my rook is already open and pointing at the king's side. I can quickly bring my bishop out. I can bring my knight out, and I'm attacking. So that's the idea. And what my opponent played here is incorrect, right? So he played knight c6, and this was the first and the most important mistake of the game, because after that he played very well. I checked this game with an engine, and most of his moves were like first or second engine move or third, but he played very precisely, and despite that my advantage was so decisive that I was just able to convert this into a win. So the way to go here is with this bishop sacrifice on f7, right? So bishop takes, king takes, now f takes e5, so the knight is pinned, so I'm attacking the knight because the rook attacks here, the pawn attacks here, so obviously he takes the pawn with the knight, and now I go queen d5. So the queen cannot be taken because the knight is still pinned, so he has to move somewhere with his king, and I will recapture the knight on e5, just winning my piece back. The pawns are equal, but I clearly have a very nice attack, right? So his king is misplaced. It will never be able to castle. It's in the open. His knight is his knight is under attack, rook, but I will just quickly bring my pieces out, and very pleasant position. So he plays king to f8, which is not very good because it maintains the pin on the knight. So the best move is king e8, and it's a little maybe unintuitive because you walk right into another check, and the main line goes queen e7, queen takes c7, so now I'm up a pawn, although black can actually take this, although this is probably not very good because you have this queen and king aligned on the same file, and I'm bringing my rook out, I'm bringing my knight out. So, but even if black can capture this pawn, my initiative is still very much decisive. But that didn't happen, right? So he played king to f8. I took the knight, obviously. He goes d6, which is a very good move. I go queen back to d4, so right now all I'm doing is maintaining pressure on this knight. He goes queen e7, just, yeah, I don't know, just maybe trying to attack this pawn. I bring out my bishop, attacking the knight. He goes king f7, so he's defending the knight. So that was the only way he could defend. This is actually not a knight that I'm threatening, but a pawn. So if he did nothing, then if I capture this, I've won a pawn. But still, my initiative here is very, very good. His king is unsafe. And yeah, this is very good for white. So that's why he felt he needed to defend the knight. And yeah, I'm just bringing my knight out. My intention is very straightforward, right? I can bring my knight out to d5 and add another attacker to this f6 square. He plays c6, stopping that idea. I play just calm rook f2, right? So I have time. I'm just going to double my rooks. Interestingly, engine suggests that here I can actually sacrifice an exchange, and it is very good for black, which I absolutely did not notice. And it's, what I did is still winning. So maybe you can win a little faster if you calculate all that. So yeah, so you bring the other rook, you attack the king has to go back, and now you go rook g6. So this is the key move, right? So I'm attacking the rook, I'm attacking the queen, and what do? So if you go something like queen f7 maybe, right? So this seems to just, you attack the rook, you protect this rook, you go out of the attack, so seems like everything is fine, but I'm now going queen takes d6, and if you do something, I'm just gonna take the rook, and if queen takes, I'm checkmating. So really tough, and in this position, if you take the rook, then obviously I take the queen, you can take back, and now I have a queen for two rooks, but my queen, in this position, my queen is much better than the two rooks, because this rook is not yet in the game, the king is exposed, and yeah, and I have an extra pawn on top of that, so a very comfortable position for white. Right, but none of that happened. I played it calmly. I just played rook f2 here, intending to double. He goes c5, attacking my queen. I just move back. He goes bishop here, just again moving the c pawn, released his control of this square, which my knight could jump to, so he puts bishop there to protect this square. I've finished my plan of doubling the rooks. He puts his rook on the f-file, and now I actually play knight to d5 anyway. So the exchanges are, I figured that the exchanges are good for me, so he obviously takes because his queen was hanging. Right, notice I'm attacking this and I'm attacking this, so he has to take. I'm taking with a queen and with check. He goes back. This is the only retreat he has, and I just grab the knight. We exchange, and now I'm not up material yet, right? So materially, black still has 6 pawns, white has 6 pawns, and you might think that this is equal, but it really isn't. So what I play here is rook to d1. So I'm now switching my play. I'm no longer playing for the f file, I'm playing for the d file. Because right now his king is placed on the last file and he cannot bring his rook in to defend. So I'm just taking advantage of the fact that he cannot bring his rook to defend this side of the board. And this pawn is falling soon, right? So he plays queen to c7, and now I just go queen e6. He covers with the queen. If he didn't, like playing something like king f8, then I just take this pawn. I take this pawn, and yeah, this is like crushing advantage, right? I've won 2 pawns and I still have a lot of attacking options against his king. Like the ideas of putting the rook here. So that wouldn't be good, so he covers, but now I just swing over here, and he cannot move the king, obviously, because then I would pick up the rook, and I'm absolutely winning. So he covers with the queen again. I take 1 pawn. He tries to force the queen exchange, hoping that this rook endgame when he's a pawn down will be somehow savable, and it might be. But I go queen b8, check. Again, he has to cover with the queen, because otherwise he drops the rook. So I'm really taking advantage of the fact that this king is just stuck on this 8 file, and his rook cannot join the game. He goes here. Now I take the second pawn, and I'm actually fine with trading queens at this stage. He takes, I take. We have a rook endgame where I am 2 pawns up. My rook is much more active. Yeah, this should be easily convertible into a win. And I did not play perfectly, but I played good enough to convert this. So yeah, so he goes king e7, and here this I believe it was slightly inaccurate, because I just went all greedy for this pawn, but now I actually allow him to activate his rook along the d file. So I think perhaps a better move would be something like rook to d3. So not allowing him to activate his rook. So if he wants to like play on the b file, for example, I can just close this with b3. And yeah, so this might have been more accurate, but still this is definitely not losing. So he takes advantage of this opportunity, and as I said, he played really well, really precise. His moves were very good according to the engine, but none of these were. I did not make a mistake that was so bad that it would give away the advantage. So I just take the pawn. He moves the king away from check. This one I'm also not very happy with, because this actually is a bit of a waste of time. So I should have gone for the rook takes h7 immediately, because I ended up doing that anyway. And yeah, looking for something like this. This pawn will fall, but at the cost of this pawn, and my pawns over here will just be decisive. But yeah, so rook c7, he goes here, he takes my c pawn, I now take his h pawn. So as I mentioned, the earlier move was a waste of time. He takes the b pawn, I move my a pawn just away from the attack. He pushes his free pawn, right? So this is actually his only chance of doing anything. He needs to do something with this pawn. This is his passed pawn. I just go behind that, so not allowing any funny business. Gives me a check. Yeah, repetition, I just realize that I cannot go that way, I have to go over here, which is fine. He pushes the pawn, I push my pawn, he goes here, so now his rook has to do two jobs. It attacks my pawn and it protects his pawn, but it is kind of stuck here, right? So if he takes, then I take, and he will have to take at some point because I would just push, right? And if he moves the king, I can just go here, and he cannot go further harassing my rook because he's there. So he would have to take, and yeah, now it's on the one side of the board, easily winning. So yeah, so I just move my other pawn. He takes. So he decides that there is nothing for him to gain by maintaining that tension on the queen side. So he just exchanges these pawns. But now I have like a 3-on-1 majority. And, you know, it took some time. I'm not even going to go deep into these moves because I just made slow progress. My moves may not have been the most accurate, but they were not bad. They did not relinquish the advantage at any stage. So we just, you know, a lot of shuffling rooks, dancing with the king. I'm slowly but surely pushing my pawns towards the promotion. Yeah, so it was a very long game. And obviously he cannot accept the rook trade because then he's just lost with these connected pawns. Pushing the pawn. Now I'm pushing my pawn even further. He goes here, and here finally I have this move rook e8, which forces the rook trade and converts to a very easily winning endgame. So obviously here he cannot take the pawn because I queen with this one. So he has to kind of stay here. I guess he was hoping that I would somehow stalemate him. He goes king g8, and importantly I cannot go here because he takes this pawn and it's a draw. So I still need to be patient, just king e7, and when he goes here I went king f6, which again is not losing, but I could have forced a win right there. I need to just take this g8 square away from him, right? So a move like king f7, it now forces him to go here. I queen and I win. But yeah, we just repeat for for one more round. King f8 is just as good as king f7, the same purpose. I'm not allowing him to go back to g8. He has to take. I queen, and yeah, no, this is game over. We played until checkmate. Actually, at this stage I only had 1 minute on the clock, and there was no increment, right? It was 60 minutes, no increment. So my opponent was maybe still hoping that I would run out of time, but none of that happened, and the game ended like this. There was a quicker checkmate from this stage, but you know, doesn't really matter that much. So I can just, you know, shepherd the king towards my king instead of running away. But that's it. And yeah, that was game 4. And an interesting fact about this game was that my opponent was 9 years old, so a really young kid, and that was probably also why he played till checkmate. So he was, you know, clinging to his last chances, nervously glancing at my clock. He played a really good game, very precise moves, except for this one, right? So he basically made one mistake in the opening, and that was enough to to lose the game, basically. So that's how powerful this gambit is, and I'm pretty sure it will be featured in some future games I play and share here. So, and if you're playing the Italian with white, definitely look this up, analyze these lines. It's really fun to play if you enjoy aggressive attacking positions. And it's extremely successful, extremely effective at this intermediate level where players are not like super booked up on every possible opening. So I hope you enjoyed the game. Give this video a like, leave a comment if you have any questions for me or any feedback on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to watch more videos like this. And goodbye.